Waikiki light was made for lovers. That golden stretch of day when the sky softens into honey and the ocean mirrors it back like a promise. Malia stood barefoot on the lanai of her cousin's beachside home, holding a folder thick with printed invitations. 10 years of marriage. 10 years since she said yes to Keoni. And now, they would say yes again. The vow renewal ceremony had been her idea. Not because things were falling apart. Not because she needed a reset. But because everything felt full, stable, quiet. She wanted to mark it. Remind themselves of what they had built. Keoni agreed with enthusiasm, the same way he always did when events were involved. He was in the wedding business himself, running logistics for venues and beach ceremonies. He knew how to make a moment look like forever. That was part of what made him attractive. Even now, he was polished, magnetic, the kind of man who remembered candle scents and the names of bartenders. Malia was the opposite, steady, grounded, a second-grade teacher with soft eyes and a voice that could bring down a room full of sugar-high 7-year-olds. They made sense, once. Now, as the sun melted across the Pacific, Malia sat with her laptop open on the kitchen counter, sorting through photos for the ceremony's backdrop. She had spent hours selecting the perfect beach shots from their wedding, him in a white shirt and Lei. Her in a silk gown with plumeria tucked into her braid. She clicked open a folder titled, Keoni's Camera. He had asked her to help pull a few candid photos for the slideshow. Something recent, casual, romantic. Her cursor hovered over a batch labeled, Misk. Inside were thumbnails of sunsets, wine glasses, hotel lobbies, and one screenshot. She clicked. It was a text thread. Between Keoni and Tasha. Tasha. She hadn't heard that name out loud in nearly a year. Once her best friend, now just a memory she kept shelved in a box marked, Do Not Open. The message was recent, just 2 days old. Tasha, we just need to act normal. Like we always do. Don't forget she's a teacher, she reads people. Keoni, I won't mess it up. We've gotten this far, it's just one more night. Tasha, I'm not hiding who I am anymore. You said this would end after the renewal. Malia's breath caught. Her heart didn't race, it slowed. The room seemed to recede around her. Not screaming, not panic, just the sharp sound of a boundary snapping inside her. She closed the folder, looked around the empty house. Outside, waves brushed the shore like nothing had changed. Inside, Malia sat perfectly still, holding the laptop like it might bite her. Tasha, who had stood beside her on her wedding day, who cried during the vows, who gave a toast that made Keoni's mother tear up. Tasha, who vanished after a falling out no one ever fully explained. Now she knew why. Malia closed the laptop. She stood, walked to the mirror, and looked at her own reflection. The same face that had welcomed hundreds of children into her classroom. The same hands that held her husbands during the worst flu season of their lives. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she took a deep breath and whispered to herself. Let it finish. The ceremony would go on. She would wear the dress. She would smile. She would say the words. But when it came time to speak her vows, they wouldn't be what anyone expected. She picked up her phone, opened her notes app, and began typing. Not a confession, a reckoning. The next day, she confirmed the floral arrangements. She called the DJ. She ordered a custom photo album with alternating pages, one of their wedding memories. The next of the screenshots she had saved. Page by page, moment by moment, a love story, and the evidence that ended it. She had it bound in white leather. The cover embossed with gold, 10 years of us. On the morning of the ceremony, she kissed Keoni on the cheek and told him she couldn't wait to see him at sunset. And she meant it, but he didn't know why. Malia spent the next 4 days in a haze of perfection. She checked and double-checked every detail of the vow renewal as though nothing had changed, because no one could know it had. She visited the venue with the coordinator and stood barefoot in the sand, testing the angles of the sunset for lighting. It has to fall right behind us when we kiss, she said, smiling softly. The photographer nodded in approval, unaware that the bride-to-be already knew her marriage was a performance. She ordered leis made of white orchids and yellow pakake, each strand hand-tied. She selected a playlist that moved from classical guitar to island ballads. Every note was curated, every bloom intentional, every guest a part of the play. Her mother-in-law was touched by her effort. "You're glowing," she said, hugging Malia tightly. 10 years, and still acting like newlyweds. Malia just smiled. The invitations had already gone out. But she made one small change to the digital reminder cards. A new line at the bottom. "Come witness something unforgettable." She delivered the leather-bound album to the ceremony staff in a sealed envelope labeled, "Play this during bride's speech." The DJ didn't question it. That night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow and deliberate. Keoni was beside her, snoring gently, arm across her waist. She could feel the heat of his skin. And it made her cold. She didn't sleep. She watched the sky turn dark, then gray, then pale with dawn. She got up and went for a run, barefoot along the beach, until her lungs burned and her calves trembled. Then she sat on the rocks and wrote in her journal, "They think I am soft. They forget that silence can be a weapon." When she returned home, Keoni handed her a smoothie like nothing was wrong. "One more day," he said, eyes bright. "Then we say it all again." Malia smiled. "Yes, all of it." She went to her fitting alone. The dress still fit perfectly. It was a sleek, white silk gown with a halter neckline and a long slit at the side. Understated, strong. The seamstress admired her. "Your husband is lucky." Malia didn't correct her. That afternoon, she rehearsed her speech again, practicing where her hands would be, how long to pause, where to let her voice catch. Keoni texted her a photo from the setup, Tasha, smiling in the background, holding a clipboard. Malia stared at the screen, then turned it over. She pulled out her printed copy of the speech. The vows, the real ones, not the ones he expected. The morning of the ceremony, Malia did her own makeup. Soft gold tones, clean liner, lips the color of hibiscus. Her sister helped her into the dress. "Are you nervous?" she asked. Malia shook her head. Not anymore. She arrived at the venue just as the sky began to soften. Guests were seated on bamboo chairs. The aisle was lined with petals. Musicians played soft slack-key guitar. Keoni stood at the altar, tan and beaming. His mother wiped tears already. Tasha hovered off to the side in a beige dress, demure. Forgettable. Malia walked down the aisle, barefoot in the sand, holding a bouquet of white ginger and red anthuriums. Everyone stood. She smiled like a woman deeply in love. And no one knew the truth. Not yet. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke of enduring love, shared journeys, the poetry of second chances. Keoni delivered his vows first. Voice steady, filled with practiced sincerity. Malia nodded through them. Then the officiant turned to her. She reached behind her and pulled the white leather album from a table. She didn't look at Keoni. 10 years ago, she began, I made vows that meant everything to me. And today, I'm still making a vow. A different one. She opened the album. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Page 1. A wedding photo. Page 2. A screenshot. Page 3. A honeymoon photo. Page 4. Another message. And so it continued. A love story in pairs. One real, one false. Tasha turned pale. Keoni stepped forward, reaching out. Malia. She stepped back. You made your choices, she said, voice firm. I'm just giving him a frame. The guests were stunned. Some whispered. Some turned to leave. A few pulled out phones. The sky behind them flared orange. Malia closed the album. Then she smiled for the camera. The perfect picture. But the story was burning underneath it. The moment after Malia closed the album, the ceremony fell into a silence so sharp it could have sliced the waves behind them. The only sound was the rustling of orchids in the breeze. Keoni stood there, frozen. Tasha's face flushed deep red, then pale, then ghost white. She turned on her heel and walked away without a word, heels sinking into the sand as she passed stunned guests, clutching her clipboard like a shield. Malia didn't move. She kept the album cradled in her arms like it was a bouquet made of bone. Then, from the third row, a loud, incredulous laugh. Finally, someone muttered. It was Malia's older brother, Kainoa, the one who had never liked Keoni, never trusted the way he smiled too easily, laughed too loud. Keoni whipped his head toward him, jaw clenched. "You think this is funny?" Kainoa stood. "I think it's overdue." The murmur of the crowd thickened. A phone camera went up. Then another. Keoni's eyes flared. "This is private," he snapped. But it wasn't, not anymore. Malia stepped back, letting the scene unfold like a wave she had seen coming miles away. Keoni reached for the album. "Give me that," he hissed. Malia didn't hand it over. She simply turned it, slowly, and held it out for the front row to see. Keoni lunged. Kainoa stepped between them. "Touch her," he said, "and you'll answer to me." Keoni looked around, at the guests, at the musicians who had stopped playing, at the lens of a phone pointed directly at him, and something in him snapped. He grabbed the album from Malia's hands and hurled it toward the ocean. It landed short, pages fanning open on the wet sand like feathers from a broken bird. Then he turned back toward her, chest heaving. "You planned this?" Malia didn't answer. Her silence roared louder than any confession. Keoni stepped forward again, and Kainoa moved to block him once more. But in the shuffle, a guest, an older man, one of Keoni's longtime clients, stumbled while trying to move away from the chaos. He slipped on a patch of loose petals, struck his head on the corner of the ceremonial arch, and collapsed. Someone screamed. A young woman rushed to his side. "He's not breathing." Everything dissolved. The officiant dropped the microphone. Keoni backed away, hands up, stunned. Malia knelt next to the fallen guest, checking for a pulse. Sirens came fast. Someone had already called 911. Paramedics arrived. Guests were ushered aside. Keoni stood off to the side, shirt now untucked, hands trembling. Tasha was gone. Malia gave a statement to the police. Calm, clear. She didn't cry, not even when they pronounced the man dead at the scene. Not even when Keoni, now shaking, tried to approach her, only to be held back by an officer. "You did this," he said, barely a whisper. "No," she replied. "You did." They took him in for questioning. The beach was cleared, decorations pulled down, flowers trampled. The sea swallowed the album whole. But not the story. That would live forever. On every phone, in every whisper, through every breath of wind that carried the sound of a ceremony turned into an inquest. Malia went home barefoot, alone, and slept for the first time in 5 nights. The newspapers called it an accident. The legal system called it involuntary manslaughter. Keoni was indicted 3 weeks after the ceremony turned tragedy. He wasn't charged with murder, but with reckless conduct contributing to a fatality. The footage, dozens of angles, viral within hours, showed a man unraveling in the middle of a vow renewal. And a guest paying the ultimate price. He pled no contest. He received a suspended sentence and 5 years of probation. Community service. Court-mandated anger management. But his business was gone. Vendors blacklisted him. Clients disappeared. Tasha, she moved to the mainland, deleted her social media, and left behind a whisper trail of shame. Malia never showed up in court again after the custody hearing. She won full custody of their 8-year-old son, Nico, and received a financial settlement from Keoni's liquidation. But there was no victory. Because Malia no longer slept through the night. She had panic attacks when she heard waves. She stopped teaching. The school offered her extended leave. Then a quiet resignation. She couldn't walk past the wedding aisle decorations at Target. Couldn't hear guitar covers of love songs without her chest tightening. Her therapist diagnosed her with PTSD. Not from the betrayal. From the moment she watched someone die because her truth set fire to a lie. She left Oahu 6 months later. Moved to a small town on Lanai. A quiet place with fewer beaches and no event venues. She rented a 1-bedroom above a dive shop and began sculpting again, something she hadn't done since college. Eventually, she opened a small online store. She called it Not for Vows. She sold handmade keepsakes, driftwood centerpieces, shell ornaments, dried flower bundles. The irony wasn't lost on her. People ordered them for weddings. She packaged them with care. But she never attended a single event. If customers asked for a note to be added, she wrote it in perfect script. If they requested a photo of her for social media, she politely declined. Her pieces became known for their quiet beauty. Her name never trended again. Nico visited during the summers. He didn't ask about the ceremony. Children remember what they need to, and forget what they must. He called her brave. She called him her reason. On the one-year anniversary, Malia walked to the edge of a cliffside park and released a single page from her journal. It read, "Truth is not a blade. It is a flame, and sometimes, it burns everything, even the one who lit it." The wind carried it out to sea. And with it, maybe, a little bit of the weight. She still couldn't hear the ocean without flinching. But she learned to breathe through it. To hold her silence not as a burden, but as a shelter. And when a new couple reached out, asking for something elegant and lasting for their wedding altar, she crafted it slowly, without emotion, without memory, just wood, and light, and her hands. That was enough. Malia never remarried. She never needed to. But stories of betrayal don't always end in silence. Sometimes, they begin with something as small as a tattoo. In Lahaina, Jonah thought he saw his wife's unique tattoo on the back of a passing tourist. What he discovered wasn't infidelity. It was a criminal network. Next, witness how love turned into evidence, and how a husband became a whistleblower, in the story of Jonah from Lahaina.